Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blog Runner Everything, and welcome back to what is a bit of a special treat these days because this is a podcast episode. Yes, I know I haven't done one in a long time, and I'll be honest with y'all, I won't pretend that my poor podcast form was due to not having enough time or something like that. Nah, I've just honestly not been able to get around to putting out podcast episodes because there was a bit of a lack of drive, I would say, on my part. A lot of fatigue as well, which is funny, though, considering that Barcelona had been on a whole 14 game undefeated run in this time that I've been, basically barren with the podcasts. Yeah, they've been on that undefeated run, and well, I don't know what to say, guys. Life just absolutely swamped me. Anyway, today I want us to have one of our good old podcast sessions, and I want to talk about the state of Barca. Yes, I'm choosing to do this now after the loss to PSG and right before an El Clasico. The reason for doing that is pretty straightforward. I don't want whatever happens on Sunday, good or bad, to shape my opinion about the state of Barca and where I think things should go. So I don't know, where should I start? I'll probably start by, like I said, looking back at PSG. Then I will look forward to that Real Madrid matchup, and we'll try and sign off by doing a bit of future casting, looking off into the distant future and trying to answer the question of who comes after Xavi. Because now, more than ever, it would seem that we have two clear-cut choices, two contenders, okay? So, and then there were two. And now we'll talk about who those two were. But after we talk about PSG and Real Madrid. So, let's get started with our autopsy here, yeah? Let's get into our nice little postmortem analysis of that 4-1 loss to Paris Saint-Germain. For starters, if I told you that Barcelona had a 2-goal lead over PSG, but they ended up, throwing it away, bottling it, as some people would say, and they conceded 4 unanswered goals to get knocked out, you probably would think that this was no different from the capitulations in Rome, versus Roma, in Anfield versus Liverpool, in Lisbon versus Bayern Munich, and of course at Camp Nou versus PSG in 2021. Like, you'd think, well, the match you've just described to me kind of falls in line with all those other performances, wouldn't you? And that is where I would say you are a bit wrong. You see, while I very much remember those defeats, and I have seen this team lose in ways that felt hopeless and left me feeling helpless, this match, the one on Tuesday night, wasn't really one of those. I mean, am I saying that the loss wasn't an embarrassment and that it didn't leave a bitter taste in my mouth? No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that I saw far more fight from those 10 men on Tuesday night than I saw from the 11 men at Anfield, or the 11 men in Lisbon, or the 11 men in Rome. I mean, at 2-1 down, at 3-1 down, and even at 4-1 down, we still saw Barcelona creating chances, chances which they could have taken. Gundogan, Ferran Torres, and Robert Lewandowski in particular all had some reasonably good enough goal-scoring chances. Now, I know I'm sounding like one of those fans, the deluding themselves based off of some fantasy version of a Barca team fans, but hear me out here for just a second, okay? Look at the way that Barcelona wilted away just last season against Bayern in that 2-0 loss at the Allianz Arena. And mind you, that's to this day, I think, the performance from last season, which I thought was Barcelona's best, the way they played in that first half versus Bayern Munich. I mean, I don't think they dominated any other match of football as much as they did that particular game. But even in that game, once Bayern Munich got that first goal, you saw the team start to wilt away. You saw them kind of, sink back and accept, to some extent, defeat. But if, for example, we look at what happened at the Parc des Princes just last week, that's like it was the complete opposite. PSG flipped the game on Barca, but Barca still had their wits about them enough to flip the game and to go with an advantage that they pissed away. Now, obviously, I'm not an idiot, okay? And I know that last week is not this week, and that this week, well, Barca didn't come back. Yeah, they didn't come back when they went 2-1 down to PSG, but they just, went and lost 4-1, okay? But see, the reason why they didn't come back is not because they didn't try to. It's not because they didn't put in any effort to try and get back in the match. Because they did. They tried pretty hard. And, maybe a bit too hard and, went completely gung-ho. But hey, what other option did they have? They did put in that effort. And it's a reason why I believe that in this moment, we shouldn't tear them down as supporters. We should instead help them pick themselves back up. Because, there's a freaking El Clasico coming up on Sunday. And before we get into that El Clasico and talking a bit more, I just had also, I think, a bit of words to say with regards to the Ilkay Gundogan situation. Because, post-game, Gundogan came out and you could say that the reporters baited him into it or whatever, but whatever the case, he ended up talking about, the Araujo mistake and the mistakes as well by João Cancelo. And I felt he was really ragging on, both Cancelo and Araujo. And I'm just going to come out and say it. I think that he shouldn't have done that. Honestly speaking, I'm not saying he can't say what he said. I mean, he can say that, but he shouldn't say it in front of the media. He should say that in the dressing room. Okay? Keeping in mind, okay, these are the same players that Xavi told us are constantly listening to what's being said in the media. And you know which two players they were talking about back then when there were those complaints of players aren't happy with what the media is saying? They were talking about Gundogan and Lewandowski, okay? So these are the two guys who we know for a fact do not like it when this story is circulating in the media. So why exactly would Gundogan then go straight to the media and, basically just, absolutely rag on Araujo and Cancelo? And listen, okay? Like I said, I'm not saying he shouldn't have said something like that. Okay, he could say that in the dressing room. I've got no problem with that. That's exactly where he's supposed to be saying the things that he said, but not in front of the media, not in that kind of way. And I'll tell you what I think he should have done. Now, obviously, it's easy to say I know better because I'm out here watching from the outside. But personally, especially with respect to the Araujo situation, it's like, who doesn't know that Araujo messed up and that Araujo's mistake is what gave PSG the W, basically? Who doesn't know that? Everybody knows that. All of us, the fans who are watching, we know that. Whether you were neutral or you were, hate watching, you know the fact that Araujo's mistake cost Barcelona the match. So, everybody knows that. And of course, so does Araujo. I mean, you saw him just after being sent off. He was out there on the sidelines. You saw his body language. He looked like a defeated man. And that's because he understood exactly what kind of difficult situation he had left his team in. So no doubt that as the match was progressing, he was beating himself up for that big time. Okay? And if we go back and look at the foul, the one that got him sent off, you can see that that's just a clear, rush of blood to the head moment. He put his arm out and it wasn't even a full grab, because halfway through his grab, he realized oh my goodness, what the heck am I doing? And he tried to pull out of it, but it was too late at that point. But that's my point. From that moment, you could see that, okay, he didn't do this because he just deliberately wanted to bring the guy down and get himself sent off. It was a rush of blood to the head kind of moment. And I believe all of these players, Gundogan inclusive, have moments like that in their career where, rush of blood to the head, you made a stupid mistake, and it ended up costing your team the match. So I expect Gundogan, knowing that and having that kind of experience, to be the first guy to identify the fact that, Araujo has definitely done a lot of the beating up to himself. So I shouldn't be out here publicly flogging him like he just, broke one of the 10 commandments and now he has to take 100 lashes in public. I shouldn't be doing that. What he should have been doing, I think, is challenging Araujo in that moment. Because I'll tell you what I would have done if I was Gundogan, all right? I'd be like, yeah, that was a real bonehead moment by Ronald. Those things happen sometimes, you rush into something and before you know it, you screwed up and that causes your team to lose the game. And the big thing here is that if I were Ronald, I wouldn't dwell on the mistake. But, you have to move on from the mistake. But also, you have to make it up to all of those fans for that mistake, to the rest of the team for that mistake. And the only way to do that is by making up for it in the next game that we play. You bring your A game for that El Clasico. And that's what the rest of us will do as well. That's what Gundogan is supposed to be out here saying. Because at the end of the day, we have to go and win an El Clasico. At least we have to be able to get something over Real Madrid this season. But how is that going to happen if we have Gundogan out there blasting his teammates in front of the whole world? And, surprise, surprise, today we're hearing reports that some of his teammates were not happy with how he handled that situation. And yeah, I understand them totally because I'm a fan and I'm not happy. It's not conducive for the dressing room. But hey, maybe I'm just in over my head here and I'm talking about things that I don't know. But what I do know is that there is an El Clasico coming up this Sunday. So if we look at that just for a little bit, it's going to be a very tall task here for Barcelona. Basically, Real Madrid and Barca are coming in on opposite ends of the emotional spectrum. Real Madrid are basically buzzing right now because they played one of their worst ever games of football at the Etihad and they still went through. They still kicked the defending champions out of the Champions League. They're the last remaining La Liga team. They're in the semis, despite it having looked like Barca and Atleti were, in prime position to make it to the semis. Their two rivals have been knocked out, both of them in embarrassing fashion. It couldn't really get much better for Real Madrid here, okay? The only way it probably gets better is, Thibaut Courtois returning from injury and, all their injured defenders being back and available for selection. And of course, there's Barcelona on the other end of that emotional spectrum, the other end, which is the depressed, downtrodden, infighting in the dressing room, like I've just alluded to here, and the whole dark shadow of Barcelona's season being completely underwhelming, hanging over them once again. It's funny, isn't it? That Champions League match against PSG, if Barcelona, draw that match or they win it and they go through and they're in the semi-final of the Champions League, suddenly they've broken the ceiling that they had for their expectations this season. Okay, because they've gone a step further than anybody would have imagined them going. Okay, they imagined themselves being in the quarterfinals. At least we know that much, according to what was planned, financially. And making that semi-final would have been that big of a deal for Barcelona. But of course, that didn't happen. And it didn't happen in a manner that was quite gut-wrenching for a lot of those players. So, it's a lot of players right now who are feeling on a low. And going into the Bernabeu, obviously Real Madrid is going to close the roof on their fancy stadium with its retractable pitch. They're going to close that roof. They're going to make a real atmosphere in there. And they're going to want to put this La Liga thing to bed because Barcelona is the closest team to Real right now. And if Real Madrid beats Barca, with Barca playing Girona just, shortly after, it could be La Liga wrapped up within the next 2 game weeks. So definitely a lot of motivation for Real Madrid. And Barcelona, they just have to find a way here to pick themselves up. The guys like Araujo and Cancelo, they're going to have to pick themselves up and just say, you know what, I owe the fans, after the mistakes that I made on Tuesday night, I owe the fans something. So let me put my best foot forward. And that's what this entire team needs to do. Now, talking about what the entire team needs to do also brings a bit of a conversation of what Xavi needs to do for that El Clasico. Because one thing that's been working so well for Barca, while they were keeping all those clean sheets, or rather while they were keeping all those clean sheets, was of course Andreas Christensen as their holding midfielder, as their pivot. And it's hard to see Barcelona getting anything good out of this match on Sunday night without Christensen playing at pivot once again. So this is where the issue is now, because we know that Xavi at the moment likes having Frankie, Pedri, and Gundogan on the pitch. But, the problem that all three of those players have is that none of them have really good naturally defensive instincts. You know what I'm saying? Like, sure, you can play a Frankie and Pedri double pivot, but they don't have good natural instincts for defense. Okay? And we know a big part of Real Madrid's offense is Jude Bellingham, so he's going to need to be tracked by somebody with some defensive proficiency, which is why I'm low-key hoping that Christensen will start. I don't know who Xavi will bench between Frankie and Pedri, and I don't know, possibly Gundogan. I don't think he's going to bench Gundogan, though. We could probably see Rafinha or Lamine Yamal drop to the bench in this one, which will be very unfair, especially to Rafinha, considering how the past 3 weeks he's really been our top guy. He's been our best player. But it's all going to depend on what Xavi wants to do. But one thing that I feel is for sure is that Christensen needs to start that match. If he doesn't, there's really nowhere that we're going. There's no way we're going to get any positive result out of that game. Because, after having played 120 minutes plus of park the bus football against Manchester City, you can bet your top and bottom dollars that Madrid are going to want to go on the attack against Barca. Okay, they'll want to go on the offensive. And so it's very much going to be important for Barcelona to have as much defensive solidity as they can manage. So it'll also be very important in this match that, our players like Araujo, like Kubarsi are in their best frame of mind. Same for Jules Koundé. Because one thing I would say about Kubarsi is that the past couple of weeks, he hasn't really been at his best. And I said this in my PSG match review for the first leg. I did mention that he did look like some of the nerves were getting to him a bit in that game. And I feel like similarly here, he kind of carried that on. There was still a few more mistakes he was making, like in the match against Cadiz. He made some mistakes in the match against PSG as well. He made some mistakes that I should state are uncharacteristic of him, right? So it speaks more to me of either fatigue or nerves. It's one of the two. But whichever one of the two it is, we're going to need him to get in, a good frame of mind. This will be a nice test, of course, to see just how tough some of these youngsters are mentally. Guys like Kubarsi and like Lamine as well. This will be a big test to see just how tough these kids are, whether or not they're made of stern stuff, because we want to see if that last result is going to have an effect on them or not. Now, personally speaking, for Lamine Yamal, I don't think it should have too much of an effect on him, because he was one of the guys. He's the guy who ended up taking the early shower because of the Araujo red card, right? So I don't really see him as maybe going to be affected by what transpired against PSG in that second half. So it's more of a worry in that regard for Kubarsi and maybe for Joao Cancelo as well. Yeah, for Joao Cancelo as well as Araujo, just because, how quickly can they put that behind them? How quickly can they pick it up? How quickly can they put their best foot forward for what is now, for the remainder of Barca's season, the biggest match that they're going to play? It's crazy, isn't it, that his matches are going to come in such quick succession? But that's just how it works. That's how it is with these fixture lists that we have these days. These congested fixture lists, stuff like this, it's bound to happen. So now that it has happened, how can Barca react to it? Well, I don't really know if I have that much else to add on with regards to the El Clasico that's coming up. I mean, the stakes aren't as high as they've ever been in an El Clasico for Barca, but there's still something there, okay? It's more about pride, and I think going down in a way that's going to give the next manager a strong foundation to work with in as far as the mentality of the players. So that's what this El Clasico is about, okay? If I could put it in a short phrase, don't get spanked, but go there and fight. Go there and fight and be on equal footing with Real if possible. Okay, so now that I have mentioned the future for Barca, what's coming next, and we can talk about, I guess briefly, we can talk about who is coming in to replace Xavi Hernandez. So right now, there are two names in particular that have taken, we could say, center stage here. And those are the names of Hansi Flick and Rafael Marquez. Yeah, that's right. Rafael Marquez, his name seems to have gathered a lot of steam over the past, 3 or 4 weeks. This entire period that Xavi and Barca have been on this unbeaten run. And Barca have been secretly hoping that Xavi would stay. And during that time, it would seem that a lot of guys like Nagelsmann, like De Zerbi, like Tuchel have fallen by the wayside. Barca don't seem convinced either by their recent track record, or they think that they're just not going to be able to adapt to the kind of club and the kind of pressure that you get with FC Barcelona. So it leaves us now with Hansi Flick and Rafael Marquez. And for Rafael Marquez, it would seem like there's a lot of confidence in how he's handling the B team. Now, I'll have to admit openly that I haven't really seen anything that I thought was special about the way that Barca Athletic are playing, the football that they're playing. Doesn't really look any better than what Barca are playing under Xavi. But, I have seen a lot of people whose opinions I respect, in this football scape, in this Coolaverse, come through talking about how well Rafa Marquez has done, especially with the defensive element, with Barca Athletic. So, definitely defensive solidity is something Barca need for next season, considering that this season has basically gone down the drain because there was defensive solidity lacking in some crucial moments. But having said all of that, how well can Marquez transfer all of that to the first team? That's what remains to be seen. Right now, though, it's looking like he's actually the top contender to take the job, even ahead of Hansi Flick, because it would seem like in and amongst the members of the board, there's quite a bit of doubt with regards to how Hansi Flick can adapt to the situation in Barcelona, the entorno, like they call it, all that media circus and drama that surrounds the club. How can Hansi Flick handle that? Can he survive in that kind of pressure? Can his ideals and ideas translate to the squad Barcelona has? Those are kind of the doubts that people have. Whereas with Marquez, it's kind of not doubted. I don't know why though, but they don't doubt that he could be able to translate his ideas. And also because he would come in and be like a respectable figure, all that kind of stuff. The kind of jargon you usually hear when a club wants to hire a former player who once had success with them as a player. So, a lot of that jargon as well has been repeated here for Rafa Marquez. And quite honestly, I don't know how to take it because, like I said, from the football I've watched Barca Athletic play, there's nothing which has really jumped out at me to make me think this guy, is a tactical genius or is good at training players. But like I said, there are those whose opinions I hold in high regard, whose opinions I trust on some of these issues, who are saying that Rafa Marquez would be a good appointment. So, I will go I will go with trusting them and being like, yeah, okay, I will trust you guys' opinion on that. And we'll see how it all goes ultimately, see how it'll play out. But aside from that, of course, I am going to be a bit skeptical with the Marquez appointment just simply because I think it has more to do with wages really than anything else. Barca can't really afford kind of wages that a Hansi Flick might want and the kind of, budget that he would want for a sporting project. They can't, promise anything like that. Laporta can't do that. So it's probably why Rafa Marquez is now taking the pole position ahead of somebody like Hansi Flick, who, honestly speaking, if Barca don't pick him up, there's no telling where he's going to go because, there's teams like Chelsea who could be out there looking for a coach. And there's teams like Liverpool as well who are actively seeking a coach at this moment in time. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But right now, guys, it's looking more likely that we're going to see Rafa Marquez taking over from Xavi Hernandez as Barcelona's manager for next season. So again, we'll see how that goes. If you're listening to this, by the way, from YouTube, let me know your thoughts on all of this stuff. Your thoughts on Barcelona's performance at Paris. Your thoughts on, Ilkay Gundogan and what he said in that match afterwards. Then, of course, looking forward to El Clasico. What are you expecting from Barca? Do you think they can actually get a win? Or do you think they can avoid defeat? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. And of course, let me know your thoughts on Rafa Marquez. Exactly how do you feel about that appointment? Do let me know. Aside from that, though, I want to just say thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, it's been a minute since I've done one of these. So if you've listened all this way, then you're a legend. Okay, and we all know that legends like you hit that like button. They hit subscribe too if they're not yet already our subscribers here. So let's keep growing the community, guys. And let's hope for the best for Sunday night. Aside from that, thank you all for tuning in. Do have a great day and Forza Barca.